in my work, if my clients could do anything reasonably similar to this in the terms of writing their own story, conveying their humanity and their spirit and what makes them tick, if they could somehow do that at sentencing, they would be unstoppable. From the very moment a defendant is involved in this system, someone else has control over their story. They want to define that person solely by the crime they may have committed. You have a sentencing date set, and the stakes are high. Both lawyer and client need to do everything in their power to prepare. But the question is, are you ready? I'm Doug Passon. I'm a 25-year defense lawyer, a sentencing consultant, and an award-winning documentary filmmaker. In Set for Sentencing, I'm going across disciplines and outside the box to help both lawyer and client expand their perspective, build on their skills, and get real results in the form of significantly reduced sentences. All of this in service to one goal: to bring more fairness, more compassion, and more justice to the sentencing process. So, are you ready? Then let's get set for sentencing. Hey everybody, this is Doug Passon coming to you from Studio 3553 in Scottsdale, Arizona, helping us get set for sentencing today. A really cool guest. And he might not say he's cool, but I do. I say he's cool. So here's the deal. I don't know what I did to deserve this. Maybe I'm lucky, blessed, whatever you say, but I am so grateful because I have people in my orbit, in my life that I know personally that have done really extraordinary, awesome things, and people who know a lot of stuff, and people who bring really unique and valuable perspective to the work that we're trying to do on Set for Sentencing. And today I have Mark Shue, who is just such a man, to talk today. So I'm so excited. So let me set this up. Among other things, Mark Shue is a litigator in New York City, a partner at Hawkins, Parnell and Young. He represents domestic and international clients in product liability, toxic tort, commercial disputes, employment matters, and other things that have nothing to do with criminal defense, which I love. But he also operates as outside general counsel for startup companies. If anyone listening, make a note of that. But he's not just doing legal work. He's doing advisory work and point of contact for virtually all issues that these businesses are going to face. But that is not really why Mark Shue is on my podcast today, is it? He is here because he is an author. He is a great storyteller, and he recently, well, it's been 2 years now, I think, published his first book. I think it's your first book, called Please Open in the Event of My Death: A Father's Advice to His Daughters in Case Something Horrible Happens, parentheses, which hopefully it won't, but just in case. Welcome, Mark Shue, to Set for Sentencing. How you doing, man?
Doug, thank you so much. That was quite an introduction. It is such a thrill to be back in touch with you and to be on this amazing podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. And when Mark says back in touch, let's give the backstory. So this is the cool thing. Mark and I went to law school together. Way back in the day. We graduated in 1996, so we're 26 years ago. And Mark went on to, his first job was clerking for a magistrate judge in Vegas, and I
Yep.
came to Arizona, which, and the sad part is we were like right next door to each other, but we didn't keep in great touch, but we've been recently reconnected, which I'm so grateful for, and we're having a good time. So we're going to talk about the book, we're going to talk about storytelling, we're going to talk about all kinds of good stuff today. So let me just tell you a little bit about this book because, first of all, I love the title. Um, it's awesome, and it kind of gives you an idea of what you're up for, which is we're going for a ride. This is going to be a lot of life lessons, but we're going to have some fun. There's some like laugh out loud hilarious stuff in this book. But I was looking at Amazon when we got ready today and reading some of the reviews, and this one jumped out at me as something that could really give the audience a good overview. Mark weaves in personal stories, including his fascinating childhood as the only child of a deep cover CIA spy, the night he met his Italian wife and determined that the Japanese Chinese guy needed to show off his Roman accented Italian, his transformation from a clown about town to a doting and sometimes grossly incompetent father, something I can relate to, and the struggle to preserve his soul while being a litigator, something I can also relate to. So these are like life lessons from a guy who's had a really wild, awesome life. Not like party wild necessarily, but just life experience wild. So, hi. There's so many ways we could go with this, but you know that we share this love of storytelling, so I think that's the best place to start. It's also a great place to start for my audience because that is all we do all day, every day. Well, it's what most lawyers do, but especially in the sentencing context. Our job is to tell our clients' stories, or help them tell their own stories. And
Right.
that's what you did here. Can you just give me what? Because I think it's scary to tell your own story. It's a daunting process, and you did that in a lot of personal, very very intimate ways here. What was that process like? Was it scary? Was it fun? Was it therapeutic? Like what
Um,
was that?
yeah, it was certainly therapeutic. I think originally this project was supposed to be anonymous. I wanted to publish it anonymously. It was meant to be this very high-minded attempt to be an antidote to modern social media culture. This, hey, look at me, I'm so great. Look what I've done. And But I realized it was kind of just also a self-defense mechanism because um, I was just embarrassed at revealing some of my stories, some of my worst instincts, and some bad things I've done and bad things that have happened to me. And I realized that it was, in essence, it was a bit of a trick to just be as honest as possible. And you probably know yourself that the best storytelling is often the most emotionally open, where you're not afraid to hold back as to what happened to you. And so in a way it was very freeing to say, oh, you know what, it'll be anonymous. No one's going to trace it back to me. So it kind of opened me up to being more free to write about all these different things. And once it was done, and I went to my publisher and told him about my grand plan, he basically laughed me out of the room, and so said that that's a non-starter.
Your
And of
grand
course,
plan to make it anonymous, you mean? Or
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So he just said it's not going to happen if you do it anonymously. And and of course, the irony is that now I'm a total whore of social media. So it's but the social media helped in that it connected me to people like you and the people that I wouldn't have been in touch with for so that I see the good and the bad in it. Absolutely.
Well, I also imagine you probably connect with total strangers who read the book, and I saw some of those comments actually online, like "you are not alone" type
Yeah.
comments, where you, by telling your own story, you've not only gone through your own sort of redemptive process, but you helped other people come to their own, confront their own stories.
Yeah,
That's a
that's,
big
I
deal.
mean, it's really it just makes my day when I hear it. I mean, it's just when you hear something out of the blue or just someone you haven't heard from in a while, and it just touched them on some level. I remember all those comments, and so it's really it's something that, to contrast it with law, where you're kind of you're conditioned to get an immediate response, right? And it's either granted, denied. You find out right away. Writing a book is a pretty different process. You really have to kind of wait for people. I think at one point I actually Googled how long does it take to read a 350-page book. So I'm waiting for a response. But after a while, you have to be patient about it. And months later, there are people, kind of random people, will come by and say something.
And I was going to look at the Audible because it's available on Audible, and I listened to the book, but that's a real easy question to answer. How long does it take to listen to a 350-page book? But, and you read, by the way, Mark reads the book too, which is awesome. So, so this is life lessons for your daughters, and they are, how old? You have two. They inspired you, this work of art.
Sitting by myself on yet another flight for my work as a litigation attorney, I would inevitably think about my 4 and 3-year-old daughters. And there was always one fact that consumed me, which was hard to believe and impossible to ignore. My girls had seen me almost every day of their lives. We quite literally spent hours looking into each other's eyes, trying to find each other's soul. I fed them. I changed their diapers. I dressed them, many times so awkwardly that they started crying. I coaxed them to sleep. I taught them, disciplined them. They knew me as their dada, a reliable source of unending love and comfort. And yet, at these ages, they would not remember anything about me had I left their world on a plane. After the umpteenth time that I was convinced all was lost because the folding tray tables started to shake, I decided that I needed to leave something for my girls, more meaningful than a material possession, more detailed and thought-provoking than a video, mankind's greatest, most influential, most powerful creation, the written word.
How old are they?
They are now 13 and 12.
Okay, so maybe not old enough to read the book at this point. Do you think they will at some point?
Yeah, they will. At first, they wanted to read it right away because I told them that there was bad language, and they wanted, as soon as they heard that, they're like, all right, we really want to read it. And then I kind of said, all right, well, you can go ahead. Why don't you read it? And then, of course, after they read about themselves and some of my memories of them, they kind of dropped it. So it was, I think eventually in time, I hope that'll pick up. But
it's really cool. And when I was reading this book, I had a couple of thoughts. First of all, in my work, if my clients could do anything reasonably similar to this in the terms of writing their own story, conveying their humanity and their spirit and what makes them tick, if they could somehow do that at sentencing, they would be unstoppable. Like the needle would be buried, right? And I guess that's my job to help them do that. The other thing that struck me, and I've said this to you before, is that I felt a little. I talk a mean game as a lawyer about how important it is for us to know, like really know our clients and dig deep and just find out the things about them that reveal their essence and their humanity. And I was reading this book and I'm like, damn it, man. I went to law school with this guy. We were friends. We hung out socially. We were on the law review together. Like, we spent a lot of time together. And page after page, or whatever you'd say in the audio version, I'm like, shit, I didn't know that. I did not know that, and I felt like I missed out on a lot during our time together. The fact that you speak 3 languages, the fact that you're a freaking soccer, or would you say football fanatic. I'm sure we talked about The Simpsons back in the day, but I didn't remember that. You're a massive, massive Simpsons fan like me, and I think the biggest revelation was how deep you were into story already as a young person, like I was. You were you were into screenwriting and all that stuff, and I was too. And even in law school, in my second summer of law school, someone gave me the Sid Field screenwriting book, and I was already writing screenplays. And it sounds like you were too. So I miss that. I feel crappy, but now I'm going to now I'm gonna peel back the layers on it, and you're gonna tell me
Yeah.
all about it. So, because narrative is everything in our work, and you have a deep bench of understanding with narrative, and it started a long time ago. So give me that backstory. What got you into it, and what did you read, and what made your heart sing about all this storytelling stuff early on?
Yeah, I actually didn't really. I was a big movie buff during law school and pop culture and TV and so forth. And I think that's I think we literally communicated with each other by Simpsons quotes and episodes. But I think once I started clerking for a federal magistrate in Las Vegas, and at that time, I think I felt some sort of creative itch that wasn't being fulfilled. So that's when I started to read, Sid Field, read lots of different screenplays, and I think when you start, it's not really apparent to many of us, but you start to realize that every good screenplay follows a very familiar structure, and whether it's because it captures subconsciously our attention and what kind of moves us, it always follows the same arc, and that kind of, it was also helpful in terms of recognizing how to write well, write legal briefs well, in that you have to capture that attention, and there are certain conventions that you have to follow in order for it to be good and to really get the reader's attention.
And it's interesting because screenwriting and screenplays is a whole different animal than a novel or book like Please Open. One of the things I think is so relevant to the work we do is you have to be you have to choose your words really carefully in a screenplay because you can't go on and on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be 90 or 100 pages, so every single word you put on the page matters, and that translates really well into what we do as lawyers, or at least it should, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I think in terms of writing, I kind of remember that I kind of structure it as a lifespan. So in the beginning, it's really kind of simple concepts like, mind versus matter, balance, friends, and then kind of in the middle becomes more about doing well socially, doing well at work, and then towards the end, it's more about kind of the larger picture things of you know marriage and kids and mortality and religion.
The mind is often at odds with the body, and where this battle is most sharply delineated is in sports. When I was a boy, my parents told me about the legend of Shun Fujimoto, the Japanese gymnast who broke his kneecap during his floor routine at the 1976 Olympics. Refusing to even let his teammates know he was injured, he then competed in the pommel horse and rings events, culminated in a twisting somersault dismount that further resulted in a dislocated kneecap and torn ligaments. He stuck that landing and hobbled over to his coaches. His Olympics was over. His gymnastics career was over. He also got a 9.7, the highest score of his career, which allowed Japan to win the team gold over the Soviet Union. This story is so incredibly, indelibly Japanese. The silent suffering, the completion of a task in the face of excruciating pain, the sacrifice of oneself, and the belief in the primacy of human will. Broadly speaking, we East Asians believe that repetition and persistence can prevail over any obstacle, any pain. We Italians, ma stai scherzando? Che cazzo dici? Vai a cagare. Not exactly the same mentality.
And I think what helped me a lot in writing was that I took almost a brief writing exercise, which is, if I were to say something about say being humble, the contrarian side of me would say, well, what would the person on the opposite end say about having humility? How could it be a bad thing? And so I was constantly doing this this back and forth internally in my head, and it helped with the writing because you try to hit a middle ground, and you try to hit something that most people can maybe agree with.
Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to a very often overlooked concept about writing, not just for screenplays, about anything, but there's what the story is about, but then there's what's the story really about, these deeper universal truths about friendship or career or these things we struggle with. So okay, you mentioned Sid Field. Do you have so I have a bunch of books. I think I've read most of the books out there, but I have like a small handful of books and you don't have to say the ABT, by the way. But do you have other books for that people you would say, okay, if you're really into screenwriting or storytelling or writing in general, this is the book you need to read?
I reference it in my book, but I think Stephen King's On Writing is tremendous. It's so good, and it's just the fact that as many books as he's written, to hear it over and over again about other writers' references is pretty is quite fantastic. And it tells you, it kind of gives you the basics of how to write and kind of how to approach writing. And it weaves in his own personal story. He was rehabbing from a near fatal car accident that happened, and it's so good. And I think that in terms of I read Sid Field, I just read a lot of annotated screenplays, and I think the more you read the good ones by osmosis, you just kind of you become better. It's kind of what they say about being a good writer: is you need to read a lot of books, right? So same thing with that. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and there are websites where you can get for free tons of screenplays, and I did a lot of that as well. Yeah. And then there are some books that'll like dissect them. I remember I did one on Chinatown. It was actually like 3 scripts by Robert Town and Thelma and Louise and stuff. But yeah, highly recommend that. So obviously it's going to help you in your prose and your writing, your novel, but has it helped you? Has being a student of story and narrative structure helped you in your life in the law?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
How?
you kind of well, I saw this first, being a clerk, and I think that good storytelling is simple. I mean, I believe it's the simplicity of it is very key. And I think in terms of writing as well, it needs to be, I try to tell our younger attorneys that, judges and their clerks are just like you and me. They don't look at a huge brief with hundreds of exhibits and say, wow, this is awesome. I can't wait to spend all night on this. So there has to be, you have to kind of pick your message and get it across and say it in a way that that someone who is not familiar with the case can understand it. I think many of us can take a really complicated case and provide really detailed analysis on it so that a judge can understand it. But the real test is if you can explain those very same concepts to someone off the street who's not familiar with the law, not familiar with the facts. So that's something I've always emphasized. And I think that having that storytelling structure and being able to keep the reader's attention has been really critical in terms of my practice.
I think the ironic thing is they teach us, I think, the opposite advice in law school. It's all about how do we dissect this complicated case and how do we write in legalese and how do we talk in legalese and issue, rule, application. I still have that burn in my mind. The issue, rule, application, conclusion.
Yes.
But I don't think they ever really taught us how to talk like regular people, how to write like regular people. I don't think they ever really taught us how to view the litigants or the people that whose lives we have in their hands as necessarily regular people. You know,
Right.
they're a case and a client, they're a defendant, or they're a plaintiff. So I sort of that's just sort of my soapbox with law schools. I had a great, amazing law school professor on one of the episodes, and I sort of asked him about it. Are they doing it differently now? And he's like, not really.
Yeah.
Uh, so, you know what he said? It was interesting. He said that they teach to kind of teach to the marketplace in law school,
Right.
which is big firms. Don't necessarily want master storytellers. They want people that can write an excellent legal brief, I guess, or
Yeah. I
something.
mean, yeah, I think, I've thought about this a little bit, which is the essence of the law is rule following, right? It's kind of, you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. And by its very nature, it would seem to be dispassionate. I think of, I don't know if this is really the right interpretation, but I think of Lady Justice holding the scales, and she's blindfolded, which it means that these the balance of merits is going to weigh out um, without resorting to passion or emotions. Um, and so maybe that's why I'm sure law schools are saying, well, this isn't a graduate course in creative writing or something like that. But at the same time, if you want to be more well-rounded, you want to have that legal education, and also be able to have certain emotional intelligence, which can be developed through certain curricula, I think.
You kind of blew my mind with that, because I think it's such a fundamental tension that ideally, yeah, the Lady Justice is blind. There's no passion. There's no presence. It's just about the law. It's just about the rules. But it's such a difficult pill for me to swallow
Yeah.
when day after day I'm seeing these people and like kind of living their lives and seeing them in their best moments, their worst moments, and all the human fallout from what happens. I kind of feel like this is not about following the rules for me. It feels like a lot of times it's more about trying to break the rules.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or at least change the rules, to break them, to change, like sentencing videos. I think a lot of people, when I started doing that, said you can't do that. And I
Mm.
said, watch me.
Right.
There's no rule that says I can't, so technically I'm not breaking a rule. Otherwise, couldn't do it. But there are no rules of evidence at sentencing. So then the only rules you're left with are these norms, these things that, well, this is the way it's always been done, so this is how you're supposed to do it. And that, I don't know, that never works so well for me. Um, Plus,
Yeah.
in the criminal world, there's none of the law rules help me anyway. They're all, I have to ignore those. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I think the older I get, the the more I want to dispense with the rules, and I kind of I'm more um, I don't know, contemptuous might be strong, but like dismissive of those who just blindly follow those rules, because
Yeah.
they're going to be exceptions to anything, right? And so that's kind of our job as lawyers, is to say this is the exception. This is the instance where it should not be followed, or so forth. Um, so when you get to a certain age, you feel, all right, this is not a situation where the law should be applied blindly, or this rule should be applied blindly. Um, and you're kind of in a screw it mode.
So let's go back to narrative. So we figured out it's helped you in your legal writing. It's helped you in the way that you present and argue, I think, a case in court. Has it helped you in the way that you relate to human beings? So, like, basically the way you lawyer beyond the written word, or the case law aspect of this.
The work that I do, it doesn't involve well, I'm a defense lawyer, so
Yeah.
I'm usually on the other side. I'm defending the big bad corporation, but
Well, but Mitt Romney's told us that corporations are human, are people
they
too,
are human.
Mark.
He had a point. He had a point.
I mean, you have to deal with like CEOs and like in-house counsel, and I mean, they're arguably they're people. I mean, like no.
I it's they it, I noticed that it works most because I work with a lot of uh, the same attorneys in terms of negotiating things, in terms of appealing to their sensibilities and so forth. That helps a lot, certainly. Um, I've done a couple of pro bono matters, and they were easily the most rewarding experiences of my legal career, because it's just when you see the impact of this work that you've done, and how it's going to help their lives going forward, is it's really, and I imagine you felt that a lot, right? All the time. I mean, you kind of see where when you've helped somebody, it's a gift that really endures.
Yeah, I think that is what makes the job worthwhile for
Yep.
me.
Yeah.
Um, and the flip side is there's a lot of lows that make it very hard. And I think that maybe hints towards what you were, well, in that cool review I was talking about. Your struggle to preserve your soul while being a litigator. So let's talk about that, because there's a part of the book I remember was, your internal conflict over, do I leave this job and go start a firm where I might make a lot more money? Or it was a lot of quality of life, like what is important in life kind of stuff. I imagine there's maybe some inner conflict about the kinds of clients you represent, just like criminal defense lawyers have that too. But tell me about the struggle for your soul, and what is that about?
I think with litigation, it's a zero sum game, right? It's just, if you're winning, someone else is losing, and vice versa. And when you're fighting all the time, especially in a place like New York, where there are a lot of strong personalities and characters, it can wear on you. And I'm not the, probably have guessed, I'm not the type that thrives on fighting with people, um, and having fighting over stupid things. I mean, that's a part I think that's really frustrating. But um, that was something that came um, to mind when I was writing about that this that decision. And that was when the girls were at their most at their cutest, certainly. I mean, they were 4 and 3 years old when I started writing, and that was, that's time that I knew I could never get back. And I really wanted to make a conscious decision to be present in their lives. Um, and I think having, it's weird because, I was born in Tokyo, and I lived in Tokyo, and I'm very familiar with Japanese culture. And I lived from 11 to 14 in Rome. And the two views of jobs and profession are very different. In Japan, it's all consuming, and in Italy, a lot less. And they like to enjoy their life, and the U.S. is somewhere, I think, in the middle. But I think the idea of having your work define who you are as a person is a dangerous one. I think it's worthwhile, and certainly an admirable trait in many people. But um, for me at that time, having waited so long to kind of get to that point, to have kids, and having this opportunity, felt like, all right, I need to kind of make sure, step back, and really appreciate who they are.
So this is a little off track, but I was going to ask you earlier how long it took you to write the book, so I could do the math. If
Yeah,
you know, this sounds like 5 or 6 years, right? Based
yeah,
on how old your kids were. But I'm also interested in your writing regimen, like, because you are a young dad at that point with two little kids that need a lot of attention. That is one of my biggest struggles. Is when do I write? How do I write? How do I find time to do that? What's
yeah.
your advice there? What's your regimen, and what's your advice to anyone who's trying to get some writing done?
Um, it's a matter of consistency, doing it every day. And I think that is, um, it's so important to try to just set aside, even if it's 15, 30 minutes to write every day. And also just getting it out there, not being too much in your head about whether it's good or not, or whether it's, you just want to get that first draft out. And actually, I'll draw this back to a Simpsons thing, but there was an article
Yes.
in the New Yorker about um, this legendary Simpsons writer. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't even know his name, but a legendarily reclusive Simpsons writer,
Oh,
and they tracked him down and they asked him a whole bunch of things, and he said his method of writing was basically to just like have a little idea in his head, and then he would just say, Homer says this, Homer says that, and Marge says this, Marge says that. Don't even try to make any jokes. Just do it as bare bones as possible. And so you get that out there, and all the fun is in rewriting. And so, once you get that first draft out there, now this is the fun part. You rewrite, you look at it again. And that's kind of, I think that really resonated with me. It's just that you can always fix something that's on paper or on your computer. You can't fix a blank page. Um, and so in terms of actual time to write, it was pretty grueling. There were a lot of late nights, early mornings, time on the weekends, just like a couple hours here and there. And for that, I really need to thank my wife, because she was, if I'm not around, then the burden's double on her. So, but she was always very supportive of what I did. And, you just kind of, when you're thinking about a project all the time, you inspiration will hit you at the oddest times. And so, when you have a phone to type in notes, or a pad or something, just write that down, and eventually, by the time you actually sit down, you won't feel as though, oh gosh, I don't know what to write about. You kind of already know in your head what you're going to write about.
yep. 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 I find, like, I like to ride my bike, and I find that's when my mind is cleared
Mm,
out and those moments come, which makes it very difficult because I do want to whip out my phone and,
yeah,
like, tape some notes or dictate, and the wind's blowing, and so I'm either going to crash my bike or I have to stop the ride to actually, because I have a terrible memory. I know I'll forget it by the end of the ride. But that's, I 100% agree, and I didn't say this. Somebody said it. I don't know who, but all of writing is essentially rewriting, which is exactly what you're talking about. Get it out there. It's gonna suck. We call it
yep,
a vomit. I call it a vomit. Somebody calls it a vomit pass. That's what I call it. And then it's just get it on the page, and then go from there. And then
yeah.
McKee. I don't know if you're a McKee fan, Robert McKee, but have you read Story in
I
that?
haven't I haven't read his stuff. I only know of his fearsome reputation and adaptation, which apparently is not even true. But
He was on The Simpsons as well.
oh,
There
really?
was one episode where he's on this. I can't remember which one it was, but he says basically after you've written your first pass or your first draft, then what the story we talked earlier, like, what's the story about, but what's it really about? And
Yeah.
he says that once you've done that work of a first draft, then it really starts to become clear. What am I really? What's the big
Mm,
idea here? What am I really trying to convey with this story? And really, it's like one word. What this is a story about family, or it's a story. And he said, write it down on a post-it note and slap it on your monitor. so that
Uh,
when you do your rewrites, that
right,
is kind of like your beacon,
right,
guiding
right,
you the
right,
whole way, because then everything is moving that idea
right.
forward. So I try to do that as well. Did you see The Offer? Have you watched that show, The Offer, on
I
Paramount Plus?
haven't. I haven't.
It's really, really, really
Good.
good. It's about the making of The Godfather, but
Yep.
there are these scenes in there where they're pitching movies and they're pitching The Godfather, and they're like, this is just a mafia picture, and we don't need another mafia movie. And he says this isn't a story about the mafia. This is about family.
Mm,
And I thought, okay, that's a perfect example of they figured out that's what this movie is really about. And
right,
that
right.
was their one thing. Chapter
Sure.
6, the cosmic calendar. I had not heard this concept before, and it kind of blew my mind into pieces.
Let's talk about history. Not just human history, but from the Big Bang. Scientists generally agree about the age of the universe, and I could give you a number that will end in a lot of zeros, but it may be hard to truly wrap your heads around that figure. So let's condense the entire period into a manageable number, say 1 year. So from the Big Bang until the moment you're reading this sentence is exactly 1 year. When do you think dinosaurs were wiped out by that giant meteor or asteroid? Which month would that have been? July? Way off. Maybe September? No, that's when Earth would have been formed. October? Thanksgiving? Try December 25th. On that same scale, when did man start to walk upright? 3 hours before the end of the year, at 9 p.m. on December 31st. The first civilization would have appeared 15 to 20 seconds ago. Less than 6 seconds before the new year, man began to write. The Revolutionary War, a half second ago.
So I think when you look at that, you just kind of realize that your life is you're not that big of a deal, and that the things that you do they're very fleeting. What do you think is the most important thing in the world is really just a thing that can be overcome, that will pass. And I just came back from a trip to Israel and Jordan, and just saw the amazing artifacts from thousands of years ago, and it feels like such a long time, and yet that's also just a blip in this history that we have. So it's just something. It's something that I found was worth. Thought it was worth exploring. And in the book, I wrote that I actually drew out a graph, because I couldn't locate the original source material. I just kind of drew out a graph, and how many years, and when humans would have appeared on the planet, based on this cosmic calendar. And then I realized that Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson had already done all this, so they already did all the work.
I think for me and the work I do, it resonated really powerfully, just in the idea that even in just forget my work, but just the idea of, um, you know, the what do you call it, critical race theory and all this stuff, like this idea that, oh, this was so long ago. Why are we still talking about this stuff? Like, it doesn't. I didn't have slaves. This doesn't matter to me, and everything's fine now. And the idea, when you look at the cosmic calendar, you realize we're only talking about 100 years ago for the most part. Maybe 150, and it's a blink of an eye. So of course, that the system that we have now is still reeling with systemic injustices and remnants from a blip, not even a
Yep.
second on your
Yep.
timeline, probably, right? It
Yeah,
was
and
a
I
second
think,
ago.
that not to go into old man mode too much, but it's where the news cycle is so short that people just kind of tend to think, oh well, that's old news, and that's you know, are we done talking about this, or that kind of stuff. And it's getting harder and harder to hold people's attention with regard to whether it's world events or things that have taken a long time to try to dismantle. Um, and that's something that we all have to kind of. It's really tough. I see it also in my kids in terms of their attention span and not focusing on certain things after a while.
Yeah, mine kids too, 100%. And I think just back to the cosmic calendar, my standard reply when someone says you're living in the past, move on. And I probably stole this too, but I say, I don't think I'm living in the past. I think the past is living in us. And we have to understand that. We have to realize that, which
Yeah.
is a clumsy segue into the one of the more serious, heartfelt revelations in the book is the story of your father.
He was a deep cover intelligence officer for the Central Intelligence Agency for 20 years. Just being able to say that he used to work for the agency was significant, because not many operatives get to have an overt retirement. He was finally able to tell anyone what he used to do, with much pride. The flip side of this overt retirement was having to go on an apology tour afterward to all our friends and family about deceiving them as to his profession and background. He was a knock, non-official cover. You know that scene in the first Mission Impossible movie where Tom Cruise is dangling from those cables and trying to upload information onto a floppy disk without triggering sound, temperature, and touch meters? He was getting a list of knocks around the world. In this preposterous scene in this completely absurd movie, your grandfather would have been on this list.
I'm fascinated with this idea of generational trauma. And I
Uh,
don't know if this resonates with you, but when all parents have secrets from their kids, right? Our kids do not know our full life.
yeah.
And if they do, they'd probably be somewhat horrified. But if you're in the CIA, then that's ratcheted up like 1,000%. And
Yeah.
so, you've got a life with a man who you find out later had a lot of secrets. And I just kind of wonder, like, when you think back about who you are as a human being, our parents shaped us for better or for worse. What do you think about when you think about your father's story and how it impacts your existence, the way you walk the world?
I think when you hear that my father was a deep cover CIA spy, a lot of people think they go wow, and they think about the glamour of it, I guess, and just kind of how exciting it was. But it was in reality a pretty lonely job. I mean, not just for him, but also for my mother, um, in terms of not being able to open up. And we all take for granted this concept of you meet somebody, um, you'll reveal things about yourself if asked. If you have some sort of connection, you'll be in touch. Later, maybe you'll become friends and hang out more and so forth. But that's not something that my father could do, and by extension, that's not something my mother could do. Yet you really had to have these walls, because if you made friends with the wrong people, then that could lead to your cover being blown. Um, and so as I was writing, there's a chapter in the book about friends and the importance of friendship, and it kind of made me realize that genetically or environmentally, I had assumed some of my father's approach to friends and kind of having these walls. And I wasn't, certainly friendly. When we were in law school together, we chatted, we said hello, but I think I did have some walls up, and I certainly wasn't by any means a well-formed person at that age. Um, but I think that really started to change once I met my wife, who was super gregarious and will talk to anybody. And I think that once I was exposed to that and realized the joy you can get from making these kinds of connections, however fleeting or tenuous, it changed my mindset about it. And then, I saw it also my mother once my dad retired, and she was able to start making friends, and she's very gregarious and likes to talk to different people now. And that's something I never saw when I was growing up.
Your wife seems really cool. I haven't met her. I hope that we get to hang out, and I hope you
She's
get
all
to
right.
meet. I get, and she's an artist, right? She'd make design
She
shoes.
is. She does.
It's really cool. And I hope you get to meet my wife one day
Yeah.
because you dig her. She's pretty awesome too. But well, okay. I think we're done. But I will say, I think your book made me think about what would if there were just one thing that I would want to leave behind to my kids about the meaning of life. And I think you just said it. It's relationships. It's these connections that we make with other human beings that make all of life matter and make your legacy, that make you live on, and so I'm just glad we reconnected because that's affirming for me, all of it. And so I'm done. I always like to give you the last word, my guest. What did we not talk about that you wish we would have? I'm gonna plug your book. Well, let me do that right now. Please Open is on Amazon. It's the audio version's on Audible, read by Mark Shue. Like I said, amazing. That's how I consumed this book. Check him out on the socials. He's on Instagram. He's on Facebook. He's on the Twitters at Please Open Book. Right?
I'm also on TikTok, but I don't dance. So,
You're on TikTok?
I am.
I didn't know that. I gotta check it. Did you know that my dog is on TikTok?
No.
His name is William Von Arsehole. You should check him out. He's
I
this
will.
really angry chihuahua with potentially substance abuse issues. Yeah, William
up
Von
my alley.
Arsehole. But again, not about me. This is about you. At Please Open Book on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the TikToks. What else? Anything?
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Listen, I think what you do is, it's really admirable. I mean, you're really you stand up for those who need help and who are most vulnerable. And I love this podcast, and I'm so honored that he asked me to be on it. And yes, we will meet soon in person.
Good. Thank you for saying that. And I love what you do, and keep doing it. I hope there's more books coming and a really awesome screenplay. And I hope that I see you and your wife very soon. Until then, thank you for coming on Set for Sentencing. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
That's it for today. But before we go, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to you, the listener, for spending time with us today getting set for sentencing. Whether you're a lawyer, someone who could use the help, or maybe you're just a true crime buff who loves the inside scoop on how this whole thing works, I am so glad you're here, and I hope you keep listening. If you like the podcast, please do me a favor. Spread the word about Set for Sentencing and give us a rating and review on the iTunes podcast platform. It would really help. Last but not least, if you're interested in knowing more about what I do, mitigation videos, case consults, live teaching, on-demand educational content, books, articles, all of it, please visit www.dougpassonlaw.com. I'm Doug Passon. Until next time, hang in there. Wait a minute, that's a stupid way to sign off a podcast about sentencing. Hang in there. What's the matter with you, man? I guess they call that gallows humor. Sorry. All right. Well, I will see you next time on Set for Sentencing. Bye-bye.